Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this live webinar. This is the second webinar where we do around the series of the 5G feature community. And on great demand, we are touching upon on the enterprises this time. The previous webinar was about the consumer. So we are going now to touch on the what 5G can bring and how it can change the world of the enterprises. So as an introduction, we were going to have a couple of keynotes. So we're going to have first a presentation from GSMA Intelligence. Then we're going to go through two presentations, one from Nokia and then from Orange. And we will then jump to a panel discussion where we'll be also joined by all the presenters, the keynote speaker, but also with Vodafone. So with this one, then I would like actually to go to the setup of our speakers. And I'm very pleased to say that for the first time, I list in my career here to have a full female panel. So thank you for actually making it possible. So we will have Jean Lawrence from Nokia, where we have Natalie Ginsberg from Orange, Elizabeth Ramsey for Vodafone, and Christina Paciora from GSMA Intelligence. So with this one, I don't want to waste too much time. I just want to let you know that please, if you have any questions, comments, or anything you want to let us know, you can utilize the chat that you have within the LinkedIn Live, and feel free to put your comments or questions. We will do our best also to try to answer your question during the panel. If not, we will try to come back to you. So with this one, then I want maybe to go to the next phase of the session. And we're going to start, if you go to the next slide, you will see we're going to start with our first presenter keynote speaker. Christina, I want to welcome you then to join the stage on LinkedIn Live. Christina, I'm going to give the floor to you to present about the studies that you've done on enterprise. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Barbara. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start with setting the scene, basically, based on the work we do at GSMA Intelligence. GSMA Intelligence is the data and insights arm of the GSMA, the Global Association of the Mobile Industry. So we produce data sets, syndicated research. We do projects across the areas of mobile networks, sustainability for networks, enterprise as well, IoT, digital consumers, and others. If we go to the next slide, and the next one, please. This is really an update on where we are with 5G network rollouts and adoption of 5G services. So we can now say that we are firmly in the 5G era. If we look at 5G mobile services adoption, for 2023, 5G is expected to be taking up 18% of the total mobile connections mix. And we anticipate that by 2030, this will have reached to 55%. Next slide, please. In terms of network rollouts now these are the data up to Q3 2023. We have 297 operators who have launched 5G across 100 country markets, and we have another 80 who have announced plans to launch 5G. This includes countries in Latin America and Africa as well. So basically 5G is now present across all regions of the world in one way or another. So basically, it's fair to say that it's now a global technology. Next slide, please. Now, we ask operators about their priorities in terms of like their enterprise agenda, as we call it. And this may include 5G, but may also include earlier generation technologies, because operators have been active in the enterprise market for quite some time now. So when we ask them about the primary goal that drives their enterprise strategy, of course, connectivity comes first. Now, we have around 1 in 5 who are pointing like for the goal of leadership, of gaining leadership in both connectivity and services as the primary goal driving their enterprise strategy. Obviously this is expected because like having more than half operators prioritizing connectivity and connectivity-related goals is about really defending their core business. Unsurprisingly, 5G connectivity services are seen as the top success factor as well for enterprise strategies, followed by IoT services, which indicates not only IoT's growing relevance in operators' portfolio, but also like the increasing variety of end user devices, like the more types of assets that can now be connected for enterprise digital transformation purposes. Next slide, please. Let's see how fast operators are moving in this direction. Now, when it comes to enterprise offerings of operators, this has been, also operators have been making progress towards this in the last few years. They have effectively increased their share of the revenue that's stemming from enterprise segment to an average of 31%. That's a global average based on the operators that we are tracking. And to them, the enterprise segment really represents also the incremental opportunity to monetize 5G deployments in addition to consumer-oriented 5G. So opportunities around digital services, they are seen as key for operators achieving growth, revenue growth. Now, the enterprise portfolio can encompass connectivity and so-called beyond connectivity services, such as private networks. We will talk about this in a bit, IoT, managed services, security, cloud, edge, and so on. Next slide, please. But we really have a technology business case here. So networks, mobile networks are getting more relevant with the digital transformation use cases. They can act as the backbone of new use cases such as industrial asset monitoring, digital twins enabled by sensors, or like be the enablers of as-a-service business models, as we call them. And 5G is really designed to cater for such needs. On the other hand, enterprises, so the demand side of the world, when they are looking to upgrade their networks, now 5G really comes to mind. So 5G slowly but steadily has been establishing itself as one component, one tool for enterprises to achieve digital transformation in operations and in their offerings. Next slide, please. Now let's quickly look at private networks. So operators have been having expectations in different verticals when it comes to private networks. This data comes from the annual survey we do when we ask them about what is really your expectations. We can see like the more consumer-oriented verticals coming up quite high. So media, this could also include like applications in venues, in Stadia, in retail stores, multimedia-based applications, as well as consumer electronics come up really high. Hospitals and airports are in particular need for secure and reliable networking. So this is like why private networks are finding a good fit in these verticals. Now, compared to previous years, oil and gas, mining, agriculture, they are also appearing to be attracting more interest of operators as they rely on machinery, on equipment. They need to ensure worker safety. They might be taking place in remote locations and so on. We can elaborate more on this as the event goes on. Could we go to the next slide, please? And now finally, like some comments around the private networks. Now, this is an area that's now contested by more players, obviously, than operators. Can have vendors, infrastructure companies, hyperscalers as well, so big tech cloud companies. So enterprises are now in front of more options, and they're being called to innovate using mobile technologies. This is typically a market that's more demand-led, as I'd like to say. So enterprises' needs is really what determines the deployment models, like the scale of these solutions as well. And depending on enterprise needs and preferences, like we have different roles for operators and the respective mobile vendors as well. And with that, I'd like to really wrap up my presentation. Hopefully I didn't take up more time than I should, and give it back to Barbara for introducing the next speaker.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for setting up the scenes. And again, if anyone has a question for Christina for the panel later, please feel free to add your comments and questions on the chat. Okay, so we can go then to the next slide where we have the next keynote speaker. So I would like then to introduce to join us Jean Lawrence, which is the VP of Marketing Communication within Nokia Cloud and Network Services. Jean, I know you're going to give some very interesting examples, so over to you for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Barbara, for having me, and thanks to everyone for joining today to hear some thoughts on the 5G enterprise revolution. So I'd like to start with just a bit of humor. I know that 5G is a serious business topic and a serious technical topic, but on the next slide here is a little sort of cartoon that made me laugh. So, two people talking, what makes a smart device? Watch this. Then I may need to reset the network, update the firmware, run a malware virus scan, or hackers will spy on you, and then I made it fast. And wait, with 5G, everything will be this smart. So just a little humor that, the road is promising and also a little bumpy from time to time, to be real about it. So I wanted to look at the topic of the 5G enterprise revolution from two angles. Next slide, please. The first that I'll go through is the role of ecosystems in the transformation of 5G for enterprises. So I'll talk about that first, and then I'll switch gears to 5G private industrial networks. I think these are, from our perspective at Nokia, the areas where we see a tremendous amount of innovation and things really happening already today in terms of the 5G enterprise revolution. So on the ecosystem side, the next slide, please. What we're really seeing is that it used to be much more about connectivity. And of course, that is still extremely important. As Christina said, good solid connectivity with 5G is the bedrock and the most important KPI for 5G to work very well. But with 5G being by its nature much more programmable than 4G, being more HTML based, this really opens up the opportunity to program the 5G network, and that in turn really enables a much bigger ecosystem. And in fact, there is, we think, about 20% value creation on top of traditional comm services. So in the 4G world, we had, messaging, voice, video, that kind of thing. Next slide, please. But as we move to 5G, there's so much more that these 5G networks are able to accomplish in terms of location precision, for example, way more in terms of proximity, quality of demand, quality of service on demand, that kind of thing, that there are far more value vectors that are available in the 5G networks than we have had in the past. And that by exposing these capabilities into an ecosystem of application developers, hyperscalers, many different partners, much more of the value of these 5G networks can be unlocked, and the networks can be monetized into this ecosystem driven by enterprises in a way that we didn't have the ability to do before. So I'll talk through how we're doing this today on the next slide. So Nokia, of course, is based in Finland, near Helsinki, and we have a large Nokia arena that's about an hour and a half away from our headquarters. And we're using that as sort of an ecosystem hotbed of innovation in partnership with Elisa, one of the service providers in Finland. And so what we're doing today is partnering with Elisa in this Nokia arena, using the Nokia 5G network and a whole ecosystem of partners. to experiment with, and we're doing a lot of this today, new 5G-based capabilities that this ecosystem can use to create and then monetize new business opportunities in both a B2B2B as well as a B2B2C environment. So some examples of that, we're working on the infrastructure to enable having a hologram on stage. The Nokia Arena has lots and lots of concerts, performances, sports events that give us the opportunity to try this kind of thing. We're doing more with indoor navigation. This is a huge arena that's part of a big, larger surrounding area with lots of hotels, convention centers. So it's, how do you help somebody walking around understand, how do I get the merchandise for the concert that I'm at, that kind of thing, through their apps on their phones. We can take VR experiences outside, like to a hotel in a big adjoining complex. During a hockey game, you can see stats using AR. We can offer discounts on merchandise because the customers are using an app that's been created for this purpose, and use that app to get camera views and see statistics and that kind of thing. So we're experimenting in this ecosystem with all kinds of new services that are made possible by the 5G network. Next slide, please. This ecosystem, here's a sample of the logos of the companies that are partnering with us and with Alyssa as we've developed this ecosystem. So it's really a group of very innovative companies that are developing new applications, looking at new ways to take the 5G capabilities as part of an enterprise and an ecosystem, and create new experiences and monetize those. So one example of that is an application developer called Immersal that is part of this ecosystem. And they are creating AR experiences on the Nokia 5G network for VIP visitors in the arena. So, they may walk in and see the stadium decorated with their home team logos, if it's a hockey game or something like that. In a second, I'll queue up a video, but what you'll see in this video is the experience that a VIP visitor can have today in this Nokia Arena together with Alyssa running on our 5G network. And what you'll see here, it's a minute or two long video, is that we've created a process where you can have an AR or VR experience without even having a controller in your hand. You have the headset, you raise your hand, and that beams to cameras, and you can control, I want to see the game from the perspective of this 8K camera, here, I want to be the goalie, I want to be the referee, and have experiences throughout the arena that are all based on the AR and VR experiences that are made possible. We also have a 3D model of the city in Finland where the arena is. So if you can go ahead and cue the video, then everyone can sort of see what it would be like to be a VIP in the Nokia Arena, having these experiences powered by this ecosystem on the 5G network. So go ahead with the video, please. that gives you a feel of how 5G can make these kinds of ecosystem experiences possible. A couple actually last ecosystem examples is earlier this year was one of the first commercial concerts that had live 360 VR over 5G. So in this same Nokia arena, Andrea Bocelli was performing, and it was broadcast live to a group of people in the Elissa showroom 175 kilometers away. So they were in the showroom with their VR goggles on, experiencing the event as though they were there. They could, again, just like we saw in the video with hockey, they could switch between different camera positions, see the concert from different positions. What's it like to be on the stage? What's it like to be in the front row? All different kinds of positions. And it's really, again, an amazing opportunity to monetize 5G and to power this whole ecosystem based on these applications. One last example of the ecosystem on the final slide here of this section is just a few months ago in September, Nokia did if you could advance the slide, please. Thank you. Nokia participated with Deutsche Telekom and CityMesh to run a remote control drone over DT's live 5G network that was controlled from Belgium. So it was DT's, using the Nokia 5G network with a drone, with an application provider, with far from line of sight, the ability to control that in real time, and also in real time using 5G capabilities, change the quality of demand or quality of service on demand. So as you need to have a much finer view of something, much more detailed view of something the drone wants to zero in on, that can be controlled immediately through these applications as part of the ecosystem running on 5G. So the second perspective, next slide please, that I'd like to look at this from in terms of 5G and the enterprise revolution is industrial networks. So 5G private industrial networks. Next slide please. There was a big piece in the Wall Street Journal this year with the headline of telecom companies pin 5G hopes on private industrial networks. And we're seeing that this is a big sort of set of use cases where 5G can enable enterprises to really transform their operations. So on the next slide, this is an area that Nokia is very, very involved in. And it's really important in terms of delivering, what we call Industry 4.0 and all of the benefits that are part of that. So just to quantify how these industrial private networks are really delivering very real results, we did some research with Global Data, and we asked 79 early adopters of these private industrial networks what kinds of results they are getting from these private networks and industrial edge. Half of these respondents came from the manufacturing and the other half from transportation and energy. They were all large enterprises, multinationals in countries like the US, UK, Germany, Japan, Australia. So in terms of what these networks are making possible for these enterprises, the number one improvement was worker collaboration. Pretty much everybody we asked saw a significant, 95% saw a significant improvement there. Energy reduction, ESG is so important these days. And about half of the early adopters saw their energy consumption reduced by at least 10%, and 70% saw emissions reduced by 10%. Worker safety is huge. 61% of them are achieving improvements there in terms of reducing accidents. And then the return on investment is really there. So the companies that are investing in these private industrial networks are finding a return on investment, 80% of them in 6 months and 21% in as little as a month. So those are some of the benefits that these 5G networks are providing to industrial enterprises. The next slide goes a bit into what the use cases are. So what are these private industrial networks making possible for these enterprises? So the first is delivering content to the worker. So using applications that are running on the industrial edge, powered by this connectivity, workers can do things like push to talk, push to video. They're using ruggedized work pads, AR and VR applications for remote maintenance. So then the workers have this kind of data at their fingertips instead of having to go find, paper worksheets. So their collaboration improves, and so does their productivity and safety. Another thing we're seeing a lot where 5G comes in handy and is much more effective than Wi-Fi, for example, are mobile robots and automated guided vehicles. So that could be to deliver materials to the production line. It can navigate maps. It can work more autonomously. It can work its way around the many barriers that exist in an industrial footprint, kind of a plant. There are actually 34,000 AMRs in use today. This is growing at 36% a year. And the 5G networks are really helping enterprises use these AMRs because there's no other way to ensure constant and highly reliable and secure connectivity. Productivity is, of course, a big benefit for that, but also reduction in energy costs compared to Wi-Fi. We also see a lot of benefits around the use case of video and scene analytics. So cameras that have situational awareness, they can detect anomalies, smoke if a fire might be starting, intruders. So for site security, that is really big, as well as for worker safety, if an alert goes off if someone's not wearing a hard hat. And quality is also, of course, a big improvement because the human eye in some cases is not quite as discerning as an AI-based surveillance that's powered over a 5G network. One of our biggest innovations coming out of Nokia is video analytics with real-time extended multimedia. That's part of Bell Labs in Nokia. So it's a 3D video, spatial audio that has pretty much instantaneous ultra high definition streaming. So it can spot anomalies, much faster than the human eye can. Digital twin is another thing that's made possible by 5G in these industrial enterprises. So it's, the idea of digital twins, as I'm sure you all know, is visualizing data into a digital twin, like a digital replica of everything happening in a production site. And then when you have this, you can run dynamic real-time simulations to see where you can optimize everything from energy consumption to productivity, condition monitoring, all of that kind of thing. So those are some of the use cases that these 5G private industrial networks are making possible. I'll look at it then also from the lens of two of the industries that are really in the enterprise world embracing this. So next slide, please. The first of these is manufacturing. There are manufacturing companies all over the world that are putting in these private industrial networks for all the reasons that we just talked about. So, over the past year, Nokia has partnered with Kyndryl, with Cellnex, with a lot of the leading service provider system integrators in the world to put these private networks into manufacturing environments. In one case, we did one of the largest chemical plants in the world, 40 production plants over 20 square miles. So these are private networks, but they're in many cases quite large. And the digital transformation that these networks are enabling is, again, helping the worker collaboration. They have remote audio, video, and it's getting information into the field and into the hands of these workers so that they can solve problems a whole lot faster. So, in that case, the entire plant has gone paperless. It's all digital and all connected by these networks. Similarly, on the chemical side, we have a 4G, 5G standalone private wireless network that is connecting indoor and outdoor environments in this plant. So again, it's using these ruggedized digital devices because it's a chemical plant. Everything needs to be very, very rugged, and we're supporting with this real-time vehicle guidance and using AR for video and voice communications, emergency buttons, overlays to teach workers how to handle certain circumstances. Video analytics as well for things like license plate recognition. So in the manufacturing side, we're covering very large and very complex environments with these private 5G, or in some cases 5G standalone, 4G, 5G networks. The next slide on another sort of industry on the enterprise side where this is being adopted widely is ports. So ports have two big challenges. They, obviously want to get merchandise in and out, or cargo in and out quickly. So they're trying to improve the number of moves per hour and also to reduce the amount of cost per move. So in and out as fast as possible and as inexpensively as possible. So it's sort of like the AGVs that we talked about earlier, but in these cases, it's very often automated cranes that can work, 24/7, really increase the productivity. And again, you need to have really strong, secure connectivity to power these automated cranes. As a result of using these, we were able, in the case of one port, to to decrease their emergency stops for 90% by 90% and achieve near zero system-related incidents. So in other words, these cranes can work, pretty much around the clock with a very high degree of accuracy and help these ports, again, powered by the 5G underpinning networks, be a lot more efficient. Another final example here is with our partner Verizon. Verizon is very, very active in these industrial private networks. We work with them quite a lot. So the port of Southampton in the UK, it's the #1 UK export port for cars. And many different IoT and real-time applications are being supported there by our 5G private network. So things like asset tracking, video analytics, connected workforce. So as a result, they know exactly where all the cars are, how long they stay in the port. They have to leave the port within 24 hours or get a penalty. So with all of this underlying digital technology, you can turn things much faster and much more reliability. It's really important in ports. There's a statistic in global shipping that 1 out of 6 containers get lost. So, as the holidays are coming up and we're all shopping and waiting for our merchandise to come, it's really important that these ports run very efficiently, very safely, and they're doing that increasingly thanks to 5G. So the final slide, I think this topic of the 5G enterprise revolution is really exciting. As Christina said at the beginning, it's essential to bring 5G to enterprises. It's a greater and greater percent of the revenue for service providers around the world. And we're really excited at Nokia to be partnering with, with service providers, with application developers, creating these ecosystems where many new experiences are made possible for businesses, industrial businesses, and consumers, thanks to these 5G networks and the B2B to X business models that are bringing enterprises into the ecosystem and creating all of these new experiences. So I think, the world will be a better place as more and more of these experiences become possible and more service providers become active participants in these ecosystems to deliver these experiences and monetize them. So that's it on my section. Barbara, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean. Thank you for this introduction. So now we are going to the last of the keynotes. So we're going to have Natalie Ginsberg, which is Innovation Portfolio Manager for end-to-end and secure connectivity. So in Orange. So Natalie, please, you have a brief presentation. I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Barbara. So just before we jump into the subject, just a few words. When we are talking about 5G value creation for enterprises, it is mainly driven by mobile private networks. And just to say, just to give you a couple of figures, this total addressable market of the mobile private networks in Europe is assessed to be $5.7 billion by 2025, out of which approximately $1 billion is considered to be addressable by the operators for both connectivity and managed services. This market is very mature in Asia, particularly in China. And we see now that value is mainly coming from the US, the UK, and Germany. And in the rest of Europe, it's still at an early stage. The slide that is showed presents how we structure the different mobile private network solutions within Orange. depending on the customer's needs and also depending on the service model that the customer is requesting. So in fact, there are three main categories that goes from the more dedicated, full dedicated solution that we can see on the right side of the slide to the full mutualized, totally shared with the mobile network operator infrastructures on the left. So of course, with the deployment of 5G currently ongoing, it started with the standalone or the full dedicated solutions that we can see on the right. And this is already available everywhere. Everything is installed on the customer premises. And it's available either on 4G and on 5G. And it started, of course, for the large company, multinational companies, but now we see the demand spreading to small and medium enterprises, and with a request to have simple and packaged solutions for those small companies that are not able to handle everything, all the technology by themselves. In the middle of the slide, we see the hybrid kind of mobile private networks, for which part of it is within the mobile network operator, the core network, and part of it is installed at the customer's premises, and it's particularly adapted for industrial customers and for use cases that require very low latency and very demanding use cases. And on that part, as well, and on the one that is fully mutualized, that we call virtual private network, because in that third category, we provide our customers with a mobile private network which is fully virtualized, in fact, fully provided on the operator infrastructure. On those two, of course, the management, this is part of the MNO infrastructure, of the MNO network, and therefore it's handled and managed by the operator totally. For the operators, we consider that even though the market has started with the standalone and dedicated solutions, which requires integration capabilities locally to install the solution, the major part of the market will be on the managed mobile private networks, where there is much more value to capture for operators. I think now we can jump into the panel, because I didn't want to make a long introduction, just to give you an overview and a highlight of the different type of categories.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you very much for this introduction. So that's what we'll do then. We go to the time that we enter into the panel. So we're going to have all the previous presenters, and also with addition of Elizabeth joining the panel. So thank you very much. So we have seen a couple of presentations. Then maybe, let's have a conversation of 5G, and a lot of talks are about 5G standalone, what that means and what does it bring to the enterprises. So maybe I can start from you, Elizabeth, since you are quite fresh. You saw some of the presentations, you saw some of the use cases. I'm quite sure that Vodafone has also use cases. Feel free to mention some of the use cases, but also let us know, is, in your opinion, standalone important for the enterprises? And if it is, why? If it isn't, also why not? Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Barbara. And I've really enjoyed the three keynotes by the three other ladies who've joined us on the panel. A lot of what each of you said resonated with me. On the topic of 5G standalone, I think the short answer is yes. And I think some of the keynotes we've just heard have demonstrated how 5G standalone generates additional benefits for our enterprise customers, which means there's demand. That can be through 5G standalone being deployed on a mobile operator's core public network, and therefore leveraging things like more dynamic 5G slicing, where, for example, you may have seen Vodafone did a trial as part of the King's coronation in the UK that actually won an award for a trial of using slicing as part of the media production around the coronation event. And then also looking at 5G core in more of a standalone scenario with a private network, where we are certainly seeing demand for that, particularly for customers who are looking at some of those ultra low latency use cases that the panelists have already referred to in the talk.
Thank you, Lisa. That doesn't come to you, Natalie and Jean. I don't know, Natalie, you want to also add something? You had a short presentation, but how does it play a role standalone on what you have presented?
Well, in fact, in terms of segments, definitely we consider that that's within the industrial world that the more value on the much higher benefit can be taken, because within Orange Business, for instance, we have focused two of our strategic value propositions on what we call operational experience, and these are focusing on two main use cases. One is considering how to monetize, connect, and secure the production infrastructure. This is definitely what we call the smart industry. And in this category, of course, we will have the use cases working with computer vision for production line adaptation in real time. Of course, we will also have real-time data and analytics, and also AR or VR for what we call the augmented technician. And the second main use case that we focus on is what we call smart connected products, which very briefly can be summarized in IoT, and in which we see a kind of continuity between what we saw a few years ago with the simple low bandwidth connectivity, and then that moved to connectivity for access to the cloud for processes of the enterprise running in the cloud. And then now we are moving to the third step. And in this third step, we see that that meeting customer needs will need a combination of 5G connectivity, edge, cloud, security to provide the full end-to-end solution to the customer that meets their operational needs.
Thank you, Natalie. And Jean, from your perspective, you have the two different or three different presentation also on what you could do. So how it is standalone being considered on this area?
Yes, I mean, I agree with everything Elizabeth and Natalie said, and many of the examples that I described earlier, particularly in terms of like AR and VR experiences, and some of the industrial cases do require that. And then Elizabeth made a good point. The slicing example is really only brought to fruition in a true 5G standalone network. So I think most of the most exciting use cases we're thinking about do require that.
I suppose if I can jump in and just add one point to what Jean said, I think it's worth considering that whilst there are clear benefits to 5G, we shouldn't overstate the benefits. And in, for example, the AR VR use case Jean was giving around the latency, it's key to think about where that application's being hosted. And that's where I see the power of both 5G and edge computing coming together. That's the reason, for example, we've launched distributed edge in 3 markets now, actually, across Europe, is because of that combined experience that gives you the total end-to-end latency that makes the experience Jean was talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see also Natalie that talked about edge. So edge is a combination. So it's not just an isolation. So it's sometimes a combination of different things. But then coming back, so because we said, okay, it's important, we can reach, the full potential if we have standalone, but we also have edge computing, we have AI, we have the security, we have a cloud. So there's a lot of components that we have to think about it. But maybe I wanted to tackle some of them. And for example, is where are we in the deployment of standalone? How do we see it going? Is it fast enough? Is not fast enough? And maybe I ask you, Christina, if you have anything that you can share on those data, for example.
Yes, thanks, Barbara. Yes, this is part of our tracking. Obviously, I'm referring to like 5G SA as deployed in public networks. So I said earlier that 5G now has reached 100 countries. Now 60 countries have 5G SA networks, and based on our data, this is 134 operators who have launched or demonstrated intent to launch 5G SA soon. Now, 50% of this total is in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, fast or slow? Okay, this is a discussion. Now, for operators, 5G SA is a big change, big transformation in terms of the networks. They need to embrace like cloud native features in the network, but obviously the idea is that you provide the truly enhanced, truly different experience for consumers and most importantly for enterprises, as we discuss today. Now, for some operators, particularly larger ones, yes, absolutely, 5G SA is a priority. But for others, it's looking like more of a wait and see approach, more of a consideration about the mid-term horizon. So it is growing, it is gathering momentum, let's say slowly and steadily.
Thank you. Maybe to stay on that point. So, of course, you mentioned standalone deployment, and we also have different type of deployments of standalone. It could be national or localized. And this is also the difference when we look at enterprise or we look at a different type of enterprises, use cases. What is that you see from the perspective, for example, of the MNO, but also from the perspective of the vendor? Do you see, Elizabeth or Natalie, do you see that you focus more on localized type of things or more broader? Like, for example, Elizabeth, you mentioned the broadcasting of the coronation. I guess that is more a consumer facing, so it's more, broader
that was leveraging the 5G standalone trial network that we launched in the UK some time ago. I would agree that the rollout of 5G standalone core on public networks is not a quick and easy and low cost endeavor to go down. I think part of the challenge we have, especially depending upon your market and the ARPU that you enjoy in that market, especially in consumer, it's looking at the business case for when we can roll out our 5G standalone core. Like I said, I'm very happy that we've got our rollout starting with that trial network in the UK. We've also started rolling out 5G standalone in our public network in Germany. But in parallel, for those enterprises that have those use cases and they don't want to wait, and also they don't want to utilize the public network. They want the security, the higher SLAs, the performance that comes with a private network, and they have the funds to invest in the business cases there. I loved that point, by the way, on payback in less than 6 months. I'd love to understand a bit more about what was driving that, because I think that's very encouraging. I think for the enterprises that have those needs, that's where we're seeing the strong demand for private networks with a 5G standalone core today as an isolated network.
And what about you, Natalie? Do you experience the same? Do you have the same as Elizabeth, or?
Well, yes, definitely. Manufacturing today is the leading sector where we see that the demand is the most important. And also we see significant demand for oil and gas or mining. And of course, in those two sectors, we consider most of the time a localized 5G SA solution because of its nature. So we are talking there about quality control, critical communication, staff enablement, collaboration between robots on the production line, etc., etc. But what we see also that will come soon is also a second sector that's regarding public safety for critical communication or critical mission. And of course, this will require nationwide 5GSA because those services need to operate nationwide.
Thank you for that, and for you, Jean. So also, you are from the other side, so you're for the vendor side, so you see also very different, maybe behavior globally. What can you share what you see globally?
Yes. So yes, you're right. We have customers all over the world who are at various places of their journey. And as Elizabeth said, we have to be practical, and it comes down to business case as well as just embracing technology. So, the ones that we are working with that are furthest ahead are wanting to do things like I talked about at the beginning in terms of networks that are truly programmable. You need 5G standalone core for those. That opens up so many new application partnerships in an ecosystem, but you have to have the programmable networks that have all of these more advanced capabilities to make those kind of come to life. Natalie, to build on something you said a moment ago, I talked about these private industrial networks, which are usually more of a campus-based, it's a defined physical space, like some of the examples that we talked about. But I agree, we're seeing customers build these enterprise-specific wide area networks as well using 5G for very critical things. So I think you said public safety, we're seeing that. And another one is utilities. Similar idea, these utilities, there's the power generation plants, which operate almost more like a manufacturer, but then there's also the length of the utility network, which is much more geographically dispersed. And in that case too, because of the mission critical nature, that very high degree of reliability that's required, we're starting to see more activity there as well. So on the private networks, it's campus for us is really exploded. We have 600 plus customers doing what I described more in terms of manufacturing, ports, whatever. But your example, Natalie, we're seeing more and more of that as well in mission critical or critical communications.
I have a couple of questions, and maybe from the audience we can pick now also in this particular topic. So one of the things that I see when they ask is from the MNO perspective, and we do have two MNOs. So is a standalone doesn't make sense for you as an MNO to deploy? And I think this is probably more related to a discussion that we also had before. Maybe it's more for the consumer. So if you face consumer, do you see the benefit to go to standalone, or is the consumer actually realizing the difference? We said now in enterprise, yes, we see the benefit for the enterprise, but overall, what would you say to answer those questions? What is your thought? I don't know if
I've got a view on this one, and it's linked to our experience we've had through something called our Edge Innovation Program. So when we launched edge computing on our public network in Europe, we ran a program alongside that, calling for, even ahead of the launch, calling for application developers to come and bring us their use cases, and we would test them ahead of the launch, and then we'd test them for free and in return publicize them, and it gave us great learnings. We've already run, I just checked, latest count is approximately 50 different use cases through that program. What I would say that's shown me is that in terms of consumer adoption, I think it's partly a case of maturity of the whole ecosystem. What Jean said about the importance of the entire ecosystem coming together really resonated with me. And I think that's particularly true from a consumer experience, because if you think about the fact you have to have 5G in place nationwide so that consumers get that consistent experience depending on where they are. you potentially have to have edge computing. You arguably need to have APIs in place that make it easy for developers to know where to access those services and how to access those services to build their applications. You need to have the application developers themselves creating the use cases that make the consumers want to go out and use that infrastructure, because the consumer doesn't care that it's 5G. They just know, like my son just knows that it's a cool new gaming app and he's enjoying it and wants to use it and wants me to pay more so that he can do this new cool thing. And then finally, I think the device ecosystem, I can't remember, I think it was possibly Jean or Christina who touched on it. The device ecosystem is also still catching up and maturing in terms of compatibility with 5 GSA. So I think we're still at a point where all of those factors need to come together to create the use cases that generates the demand. And as the demand grows, it becomes easier to justify the investment in the rollout. So you'll see those late adopters come on.
And Natalie, if you want to add anything, or if you agree with the...
No, exactly. I fully agree with what Elizabeth said. We encounter exactly the same situation. And in fact, the traction for B2C is lower, and the maturity is much higher for the B2B market today. And because the solutions are available already for the B2B on campuses, on customer edge, whereas they are not yet available on nationwide 5 GSA network and on network edge on a nationwide basis as well. So it's a question of chicken and egg, in fact.
No, thank you for that. And I don't know, Jean, if you have anything you want to add on this.
One thing that Elizabeth said on the devices we talked about a little bit before, the device ecosystem, as you said, is critical. And on the industrial side, the device requirements are pretty interesting. I mean, it has to obviously interact with the network, but if you're in a chemical plant or something with a lot of explosives, I mean, I know when I go to fill up my tank with gas, there's always a sign, don't be on your cell phone while you're filling your tank with gas. Something on the cell phone could trigger, an explosion. Imagine that in a chemical factory. So the device ecosystem needs to have the 3GPP requirements, but it also has to be ruggedized for that environment. You don't want a phone to trigger something explosive in some of those. So the devices are a huge part, and whether it's a handset or a tablet or even something video oriented, depending on the use case, it needs both the 3GPP level of requirements as well as the sort of environmental requirements to make those use cases come to fruition, for sure. So that's a very good point you made.
There's also another question that I see from the audience. Maybe we can do it now before we go to touch more on the ecosystem, so we stay on the ecosystem. There was a question more related to the fact that we talked about some of the example where you can use AR, VR, and if these require indeed a specific headset, or can we do that maybe by using regular phones or smartphones, or what is the let's say the breadth of AR, VR at the moment? Where are we going? Who wants to pick these questions?
I can have a start at this one. And actually the partner that comes to mind is one that I believe also works with Nokia and probably also works with Orange, because my main contact there is based in Paris. So I worked with a developer called Tactile on an AR. Yes, exactly. Jean's nodding. So yeah. Tactile has partnered with us on what we call mixed reality, so AR, VR, and a great example that we worked on together early on was Vodafone sponsors the Extreme E, one of the Extreme E racing cars in that circuit, and they came along and created a 3D virtual model of the car and created an augmented reality pit stop as you went along the car, showing how what you could do is get the pit crew to come in and, well, probably not an experienced pit crew, but someone who's learning, you could give them the detailed instructions and how to go through the different steps on the different aspects of the car. And what I loved about it was I didn't need an incredibly expensive headset. I was literally able to use either just a tablet or my mobile phone to display the image in front of me along with the instructions. So I would say yes. I think for me that was an example that addresses the question.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't know if anyone else has a different example, but I guess we will see more go in that direction.
I'd say let's not count out Apple. Apple will, I'm sure, create something amazing. They've started down that path, and it'll be very interesting to see what they do. But that little video I showed, you're still wearing a headset to have that, but you at least aren't having a handset. And I think the move in general, or a hand type of thing, the move in general, of course, is to make everything as light as possible. So there's sort of the 5G enablement of a much better experience. I mean, I've done 4G or earlier VR things, and I'm sick to my stomach in green, 30 seconds into it. With 5G, it's not, it's way, because the latency is so much better. That's what makes those experiences possible. But I think that, as a ecosystem, we have a ways to go in terms of making the surrounding hardware a little bit more less noticeable than it is today,
and making that hardware 5G native, because not all of it takes a SIM at the moment. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, thank you very much. So let's stay then in the ecosystem. So we talked about it. It's not just the fact that we deploy a network, we deploy a standalone or not, and then job done. There's a lot of work that needs to be happening to actually make those use cases a reality. And you, Gina, pitched upon but also you, Christina, you talked about the ecosystem. When we look at the 5G, the ecosystem is slightly different. And so can you maybe, let's start with Jean first. And what can you tell us about how we get to create this ecosystem, and who can create this ecosystem? Who's taking the role to create or facilitate the discussion of this ecosystem?
Yeah, that's the multi-billion-dollar question right now, because I think we would all agree that none of what we've talked about today is remotely possible without an ecosystem. I think bringing app developers closer to our industry is a huge part of that, and it's not relationships that have historically been that well developed between service providers or between vendors and the application developers. But that's how this all gets done. So I think that from a Nokia perspective, we're doing a few things. We're building a platform that we just launched a few months ago that can link. It's a very simple developer portal that developers can use this platform to access software development kits and very simplified APIs. This is similar to the work that we're doing with the GSMA, with TM Forum, but we're taking the 5G network capabilities, which we all know telecom networks are very complicated, and we are making them much more extracted and easily used by developers. So I think that's a key part of creating this ecosystem. We need to bridge the gap between the complexity of our industry and what most of these application developers actually want to work with. So, that's a relationship project, and it's also a technology project. Like, how do we, bridge this gap and make it possible? At Nokia, we're doing a lot more with developers than we have in the past. We're very involved now in, these like hackathons and developer ecosystems. With the GSMA, we were very involved in the developer conference that happened in Las Vegas with Mobile World Congress Americas. Similarly, we will do the same in Barcelona, but we're kind of approaching it from a technology front as well as from a relationship front. And these things, I think, snowball. What we've been doing with Alyssa in the Nokia arena with our 5G network, you saw there some of the logos. Those things then, can translate to other projects and other developers. So I think it's a huge challenge for our industry. It's not something the way we've historically thought, but if we can't get there, then we'll never be able to monetize these networks. It's absolutely essential.
Maybe Natalie, from your perspective, how does what is, as an MNO, you're doing in creating or helping or supporting an ecosystem like those?
Well, of course, we have our 5G labs, more than 10 of them, to welcome our partners, to welcome the developers, and to provide them a room to test the solutions in a real environment. And also to add something to what Jean said, some initiatives like the Camera Project, for instance, which is about standardizing the APIs so that it's easy to use and reusable developments as much as possible with the standardization. So I think it's really a key element to foster this ecosystem.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, what's your point of view?
I agree with Natalie in terms of the importance of having those labs. Similarly, I think about we've got a 5G VIP lab that we have a similar experience. I remember coming in and touring it at our German headquarters in Düsseldorf, seeing the PhD students working on their projects, developing their applications in the lab in Media City as part of the Edge Innovation program that I noticed mentioned in Manchester. Similarly, we've got an environment like that geared at developers, and also we've just established a new technology hub in Malaga in Spain and as Jean said, it is, I agree, a relatively new area for us that as telcos we're not traditionally comfortable with. I can remember when EIP started and we had our first ISVs coming in to work on use cases, and you go, oh, who's the account manager for that? Well, you don't have it because they're not an MNC, they're not our traditional customer. So it's a new segment that we are learning how we're going to support them. But I think it's a critical one, and it's also one where every time I go to an industry event and we discuss this, it makes me slightly sad because telcos the challenge has been laid down. We have to demonstrate that we are capable of being collaborative members of this ecosystem, that we are not too difficult to do business with, that we're not too slow, that we're not bogged down in process. And it's a healthy challenge, and one that hopefully we are, as Vodafone at least, we are taking on. I'm sure Natalie would say Orange is doing exactly the same.
Thank you for that. And Christina, so now I want to actually listen a little bit more perspective from a neutral type of person. So what do you see happening on the ecosystem? There is anything that you can have you observed, or what is your opinion on ecosystem creation?
Sure. So focusing on 5G enterprise, we can take the example of private networks, although private networks can also be private 4G and evolve to private 5G. So we have many new companies, right? So if we could segment like who is offering this type of solutions, we could split that into more traditional players, including operators or communication service providers, as well as vendors like Nokia, like Ericsson, for example. And these companies have been traditionally into the mobile networks ecosystem. But we also have like new types of companies. So we have, let's say, infrastructure players. So companies like Dell, for example, who are offering edge solutions. We have the chips vendors as well, who are also partnering with could be infrastructure players, it could be like network equipment vendors as well, tapping into the enterprise opportunity. And we have a whole host of like new specialized companies, typically like specialized in terms of some network software capability. Like, for example, you could see some specialized players in doing only, let's say, security for private networks, right? So what does that tell us? So one, this tells us that there is indeed like, so a lot of people see opportunity in this area. So it looks like it's like a sizable opportunity market, and this is very good news. On the other hand, this tells us that actually to become a vendor of some sort is quite easy, right? So there are low barriers to entry, in other words. And I don't really want to say that, okay, it's going to be like a very small place, a very small market that is zero-sum game, right? So it's not either I win or you win. There is the need for partnerships, for collaborations, but I think we need to acknowledge that this probably softwareization of the network has opened up the space quite a lot to other companies. Now, my personal view is that at least where we are, nothing has been determined fully. So there is, for example, some people who say, oh, operators are going to lead in that, or vendors are going to lead in that. I don't personally think we can say things like that already. I believe there are some parts of the market that operators will want to be present in, and some parts of the market that probably they are going to be more addressable by vendors. And if I could pick on an emerging trend, as I say, I would say I'm keeping a close eye on system integrators, so to say. Why? Because they're closer to enterprises, right? So Elizabeth really, touched on the topic, saying, oh, operators need to do some work on how they are perceived. For example, are they perceived as easy to do work with? Are they perceived as good partners? So who is doing that? System integrators are doing that. So maybe food for thought, right? So all of these companies like Orange, Vodafone, Nokia, they're so big, they're powerful, they're thinking about acquisitions, maybe acquiring some sort of skills like that could be an option to grow faster there.
Okay, thank you, Christine. I don't know if anyone wants to pitch in or it's good enough, but if you're free.
I don't disagree. I think the only thing I would say is doesn't necessarily have to be M&A. It can just be partnerships. Jean mentioned, for example, the Kyndryl example of a great SI partnering with a vendor. We work with Kyndryl as well as along with other SIs on certain projects.
Okay, that's good.
I think the key is to show the customers that we are capable of collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point, indeed. Then there's one question that I wanted to pitch in, and it's actually related to a presentation that you did, Christina. So in one of the slides, there was some distributions, and the enterprise are pretty much built up around the 30% of the revenue for an operator. How did you get to that number? Can you explain a little bit more, maybe, so that we can see what it is representing, actually, that 30%?
Yes, so basically this represents the revenue coming from operators' non-consumer business, so the so-called enterprise focus. Now, this predominantly is connectivity focused today. So it's basically connectivity in terms of mobile. It can also be other forms of connectivity, but offered to enterprises, larger enterprises, the public sector as well as like numerous SMEs. And in addition to that one, it's the really fast growing, the beyond connectivity type of services. So all of the things we have been discussing today, which are probably like the smallest share today, but they are fastest to grow for operators. So it can be things like edge networking. It can be cloud, like connectivity for cloud or secure connectivity for enterprises. Obviously, private networks is something that is also growing fast. As well for operators like IoT, all these type of things, or like vertically focused solutions. Some operators, for example, are offering focused solutions around fintech, for example, or around could be like payments, smart automotive as well. So it is all sorts of things that also based on our surveys, the majority of operator CEOs agree this is the way to achieve growth in revenue, at least based on the situation now.
Then I'm coming back to the MNO. So Natalie, maybe, do you agree? Do you see that reflected in your organization, at least?
Yes, I fully agree with what Christina said. Definitely, we see that to meet the enterprise's needs, it will require to be able to combine several bricks. For instance, connectivity plus security plus edge computing plus cloud, etc., etc. And therefore it requires from us to build solutions that are very modular and that can be composable and orchestrated globally and centrally, because meeting the customer's needs, the global need of the customer, requires the combination of those several technologies. It's no more only the connectivity, but what Christina mentioned, beyond connectivity. That's exactly where the future is.
And Elizabeth, do you agree on that?
I do. In fact, thanks to Christina, I did a quick search of our last results to get some numbers to bring some data to the topic. To give you an idea from a Vodafone Business perspective, our digital services, so what similar to beyond connectivity, Q2 results we just put out, growing at 14%. That represents 17% of our overall business service revenue. So like you said, Christina, it's the smaller part today versus traditional connectivity, but those digital services contributed 50% of our growth as Vodafone Business. So absolutely aligned to the trend that she was calling out there.
I see some analyst talent in there. That's what
I used to be an investment banker. What can I say?
Okay. Well spotted.
I love it. I would have absolutely loved to have gone into equity research, if I'm honest. That was a long time ago.
So maybe we wanted to conclude this, so to just wrap up on the sessions, and thank you for the conversation. Maybe I want to ask all of you, and I know it's a difficult question. So, and I start with you, Jean. So, if you had to give one piece of advice, just one, because I know that would be a lot, to recommend to an MNO that wants to jump on those areas to get more 5G on the enterprise, or to an enterprise itself, what would be your recommendation?
I think it's all about embracing ecosystems. So however you can plug yourself into an ecosystem, make your network open, programmable, accessible to developers, developers explore what's possible with 5G. I think the whole idea of coming together in ecosystems is foundational to everything else that we need to accomplish. That's how it'll happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Then maybe Elizabeth, I come to you and see what you say.
Ironically, I just rushed back from a partner event today that included some people from Nokia. So I agree with what Jean said. It's about coming together as an ecosystem and driving that collaboration to make the use cases a reality, so that the customers get the business impact and the return that they want. And the faster they see that return, the faster they're going to invest, and we'll see the revenues grow.
Natalie?
Yeah, and like I said earlier, for the MNOs, it is important to have a very modular approach, so that the customers can pick and choose what they need to have their full end-to-end solution that meets their business needs. So really, in the design of the solutions, be very modular, and also provide your customers with the full range of services, from full integrated to fully managed, and in the middle, of course, with a combination of co-management on etc. Because we see customers that start with an integrated service, and then consider that maybe they need to focus on their core business, and decide in the middle of the contract to transfer the management to the operator, because they want to focus on their core business and on their priorities.
Understood. Yeah, no, makes sense. Christina, any thoughts from your side?
So I'd like to see like a high level of commitment and focus on the enterprise strategy. I mean, for the operators, because from vendor side, this is something we see already. Obviously, Vodafone and Orange are not like the example to expect like more. They're already focused. I mean. In terms of like a more personal request, I'd like to see operators and really the whole ecosystem report more on 5G enterprise performance, so that we can also help them like understand where is the opportunity, because it's not going to be like the entirety of the market. So it's going to be specific use cases, specific markets. So yes, more data, please. Yes, and more transparency.
No, thank you very much for that. So if I can conclude, so we do see at least the 5G move in enterprises is a focus, at least for all of you that are here. And it will be a focus of 5G, specifically for leveraging those features that they're less visible at the moment for the consumer. And as you mentioned also, Christina, more data would be nice so that we can assess and see where we can help also. And Natalie, you also pointed to correctly, is actually helping the enterprise to figure it out where they need to focus. And most of the time at the beginning, they will focus on everything, because that's when they want a full control until they realize where exactly is where they can let go some of those control, and we have to build the trust, as all of you said, is to work together, prove it, and build this trust to provide the features. So I want to actually thank you very much for this session, and I have one slide just to conclude. I don't know if we can put it back. It's just to shout out that we will continue the conversation on 5G and see how it's going. So this conversation will continue in Barcelona. And we have the 5G Future Summit, which is happening on Wednesday, the 28th of February. So if you're interested, you have a QR code and, log in. You can register, you can join us, and we will continue this discussion definitely on the future of the 5G, and particularly for the enterprise. Again, thank you very much for all my speakers. It's been a pleasure to have first all-female sessions, and thank you very much for the insights. Looking forward to see you soon. And thank you to the audience for staying with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.